not religious, I know what I'm doing.
משכב זכר, זה איסור מפורש בתורה, זה דבר שיש עליו עונש כרת.
עכשיו שהוא אמר את השלוש אותיות האלה, לא יודע איך קוראים להם, HIV.
It was a fuck up and not planned. I got sick. סתירה.
הוא יודע שאנחנו פה בבעיה עם הדבר הזה, הוא יודע.
תפסיק להיות הומו, תחזור להיות סטרייט.
אני אומר שתיקח בחורה ותהיה גיי.
איך אני מרשה לעצמי לתת את הילדים שלי בידיים שלך, שאני לא מרגיש את הבן אדם אחראי?
יש לי כבר את הדיאלוג הזה של איך נתתי לשנים האלה להתבזבז.
את רוצה שאני אחזור?
מה שאני רוצה שאתה תחזור.
As soon as I got my diagnosis, the first thought that came into my head, who's going to love me now? Who's going to love me now?
I am joined here on my left with Yanky Fachler and Mona Fachler and Vitor Vincente. We're going to be talking about a movie we all went to see last night, which was called Who's Gonna Love Me Now? I'm going to start off with yourself, Yanky. How did you perceive it before you went? Did you think you were going to see a Jewish movie with an LGBT theme or an LGBT movie that had a Jewish theme?
I think neither. I expected to see an Israeli film about an Israeli and having to encounter his own homosexuality, his own sickness with HIV, in the context of having left a religious kibbutz. Because I'd read the blurb, so I knew something of the plot. Almost self-exile in London, and wondering, should he come home? Can he come home? What would it be like to come home? And I actually found, although I recognized both the Israeli part and the London part very familiar to me, I found it a very universal theme, because this could have been almost any country with any kid whose family doesn't accept it. And so I just thought it was extremely sensitively done.
Mona, how did you approach it before you saw it?
Oh, before I saw it, I just knew it was an Israeli film about an LGBT young man and his struggles, and because Yankee is Israeli, I always point out Israeli things for him to go to, because I think, you know, he will enjoy them. I'm also very interested. My daughter's a human rights lawyer, and I would have gone and been canvassing for gay rights and gay marriage, so anything to do with that, and my daughter was with us yesterday evening, so that's of interest to me.
Vitor, you were there as well?
Yeah. So for me, as being an expat living here for 6 years was even more interesting, since you are a minority and you deal with challenges that natives don't. So I could empathize with this guy there in London, being Jewish, being gay, having a disease, and all the challenges that he has to face in a daily life. Being alone, doesn't have the support that most of the people do, so I really empathize with that. So it was quite a huge impact for me.
Okay, I'm going to ask you all the same question, because when I spoke to other people afterwards, which of the characters stood out? Now, obviously, it's centered on a man called Saar Moaz. Clearly, he was the focus of it. But which other characters stood out particularly for you?
I was going to say the mother, but I think probably the next brother down, who had accepted or took on himself the responsibility, as it were, for leading the family, because the father had left the family. And the rigid rejection that he had for his brother and his inability to bridge that, and that very interesting 1.5 seconds where his wife challenged him, I thought was really interesting.
Mona, who stood out for you?
Well, that was the scene, the one Yankee said, that was very interesting. I think the father, when he read the letter that had devastated the son and completely disassociated him with his family in Israel. When the father read the letter, when he read it back, the father said, "There's nothing about love in that letter." I will never forget that.
He stopped being a military man and
That's right. He became a father in that minute, and I thought that was very interesting.
Vitor.
I think apart from the family, there was a guy that was having a few shots with the Saar. I don't know how to pronounce it. Saar. There was a guy that was one of his best friends, and they had really profound shots by the river.
That's right.
And I remember that guy. That guy in the end, he always also ended up went somewhere else, I think to Australia.
Yes, he was
So
Australian.
they were more or less in the same steps, having the same journey. And they were like on the same page and discussing like really profound topics.
Yeah. Interestingly, the one that stood out for me was the youngest brother, who didn't grow up with Saar. Saar had left, and he was determined that whatever happened, he was going to be there. So
It was
I
very
thought
moving.
Yes, very moving.
But interestingly, again, we went to see it with a gay man, and the one that stood out for him was the father. And he found it very interesting the way the father eventually came around
The
to
journey.
accept it.
It was all a process, the whole thing.
How did you then feel about what we would call the adopted family? This is probably the longest, because that meant I could very closely relate to that because I've been involved, not as a singer, but associated with people who are in choirs, and the people I know who are in LGBT choirs, it's almost like this becomes an adopted family for them.
I had dealings a few years ago with the Gloria choir here in
Yes.
Dublin, and I just found them absolutely the loveliest people, and it was very clear from yesterday's movie just how much that choir, all of Saar's energy and just everything about him, he came really alive in that choir. It was beautiful to see.
He was emotionally fed by the choir.
It supported. They became
They were family.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very, very moving.
Yeah. Again, yourself, Vitor, how did you find that? Did you think that somehow or other this was a replacement family?
Well, when you are abroad, like the concept of family, it's being modified all the time. You know, whoever it's beside you and it's interested in whatever is going on, your life becomes your family. So the concept is changing, your routine is changing. So whoever have the time to sit beside you, talk with you, interested in your topics, becomes your best friend. And in the end, your best friend is the family, and family is your best friends. They are synonymous.
Yeah. A point you raised, Mana, before we came here was you would have liked to see the relationship or discover how the father and the mother went their separate ways. That was not alluded
That wasn't
to at all.
explored, and it was just thrown in about the girlfriend Orit at the end, and then we had and then I realised why the second son, who became the titular head of the family, was so incredibly rigid and bitter. Because he was very resentful. Both of you may be sure, though it wasn't said, of the father and the role that he was thrust into. He was very bitter, and that was a double whammy.
Yeah. Yankee, you're the only one here who's really lived in Israel to a degree. Some of us have we've worked on the basis that, well, this is the one part of the Middle East that to a certain degree respects gay rights, either through legislation or culturally. This tends to suggest that it probably isn't as rosy as we would like it to believe. In other words, there's a fundamental difference between a Tel Aviv mindset and a Jerusalem mindset.
But this wasn't the Jerusalem mindset, because they also have a gay parade in Jerusalem. Yes. This was an orthodox, a religious kibbutz mindset, which is very, very different.
But were they that religious? Because the women didn't seem to...
It doesn't matter. This was a religious kibbutz in Israel. They don't look like your stereotype religious Jews because they wear slacks and the men have got minuscule head covers. But I know from the inside quite a lot about religious kibbutzim. And they represent themselves. But we do know that Israel has a very vibrant gay scene. So I was I suppose because I knew that this was a religious kibbutz, and because I've been on them, I've seen them, I've seen how they operate, nothing that I saw surprised me. But I also do know that there is a very different scene. But even the fact that nobody on the kibbutz had even gone into the internet to see what is HIV shows you that this is a totally self-contained and part of the religious mainstream, most of whom would struggle to absorb anything to do with homosexuality.
Yep. Again, Mona, something that I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on this is that the only one who actually brought up the whole issue of what I would call physical homosexuality was the mother. I couldn't bear to think what you got. Most people don't even think about what gay people do. Did that surprise you?
Yes, it did, because as a woman, it would never occur to me. I never think of what gay people do to each other, but I know that men do, because that's just a fact. So I thought that the mother, I thought she was a very loving mum. I thought like her love is really what saved him in the end. And she was very honest. She really, I don't know. I mean, it was such a process for her. It was so hard for her to get her head around this son that she adored being different. And I thought it was very well handled. And yes, they were unusual questions. You're quite right, Michael, from mother.
How again, Vitor, something when I was watching it, and I just wonder if you got the same impression, is that when the mother came to London, she seemed to be quite reserved. But as soon as Saar went back to Israel, you could see she embraced him openly. It was like nothing has ever happened. Here we are, and this is the relationship. The father, on the other hand, I thought he took pretty well to Soho. He didn't seem to be phased at all. It was almost like, I'm back in the military. I'm surrounded by men. What's wrong with that? What was your thoughts on that one?
I think men have a different way of getting integrated, as women don't. And the fact that he was in the military, I've never been in the army, by the way, but I assume like when you have the experience of my father was fighting in Africa, so he's very reserved about that. But he told me that you have to be very quick when it comes to adapt to different circumstances. So I think that's the key explanation for the fact that this man, when he went to Soho, he was so comfortable.
I've got to ask you all the same question to conclude. It finished. Saar went back to Israel, and we basically that was where we left the documentary. Are we supposed to think it was all sweetness and light, or do you think? How do you, as somebody who has lived there, Yankee, how do you think he would adjust or have difficulty adjusting?
I think that first of all, he was obviously wanting to go back to the milieu he was used to, and he gets a job with a gay rights organization, so in that respect he's doing what he believes in, surrounded by people, fellow travelers, and he still has to balance his family, his real family, but his real family, A, is no longer 1,000 miles away, and B, is he's got like alternatives that he almost didn't have quite the same way in London.
Vitor, how did you think he would fare?
It's never easy to be back home, you know. From my own experience, like every time I go back there, it's like being in a different universe. So it's quite a big challenge. But he had a mission, so he had a focus. So I'm sure in the end, he was grateful that he was back there and helping people that had the same issues as him. And in the end, I'm sure he is having a great experience.
He missed family, Michael. He was intensely lonely in London. That's what came out of the film for me, was this intense loneliness. Like, obviously he had the choir, which was wonderful as a backup. And being somebody that's also in a choir, I know it can become like a little community, which is wonderful. But he loved his mum. And in his own way, he loved his dad, I hope. I don't know. But anyhow, he had a young brother that wanted to connect and be with him. And his sense of family, I think, really pulled him back in the long run.
So the moral of the story is that families better need to understand each other, otherwise we lose each other.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, that's very well put.
Yeah. Guys, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
As soon as I got my diagnosis, the first thought that came into my head, who's going to love me now? Who's going to love me now?